Today, Victorian police attempt to extradite a man to Melbourne over the 1977 Easy Street murders. The United Nations urges the international community to work to prevent an all-out war after deadly Israeli strikes on Beirut.
There is still room for diplomacy, which must be used without delay.
A trip to the States. The Prime Minister meets with US President Joe Biden ahead of tomorrow's Quad Summit.
President Biden is a great friend of Australia, and the warmth of the discussion reflected that.
And a struggling economy is front of mind as millions cast their votes in Sri Lanka's election. Hello and welcome to ABC News. I'm Ruby Cornish. There's been a major breakthrough in one of Australia's most brutal cold case murders, known as the Easy Street murders. A man's been arrested overseas in relation to the killings that happened in Melbourne close to 50 years ago. For more, Iskander Razak joins us from Melbourne. Isk, fill us in on these developments.
Hello, Ruby. Yeah, this is a huge breakthrough in one of the most baffling and mysterious cold cases. It's really frustrated Victorian police and the Melbourne community for almost 50 years. Victorian police have confirmed a man has been arrested in Italy at Rome airport in relation to the Easy Street murders, which are the killings of two Melbourne women close to 50 years ago. Police have confirmed that a 65-year-old man was arrested. He's a dual Australian-Greek national and has been arrested actually on Thursday night, but police have put out the information this morning after informing the victims' families about this major breakthrough. For those that don't know, the Easy Street killings or Easy Street murders happened in 1977, so 47 years ago, where Suzanne Armstrong and Susan Bartlett, two flatmates in Easy Street in Collingwood in Melbourne's north, were found brutally killed, stabbed several times. Police say that the details are that Ms. Bartlett was Ms. Armstrong was sexually assaulted and then stabbed, and then Ms. Bartlett was stabbed when she perhaps heard something and tried to come to the aid of her friend. The other factor that makes this instance so bewildering and concerning is that Ms. Armstrong's 16-month-old son, Gregory, was in the property at the time, and he was, after the killings, left alone in his cot for a few days. And it was only when next-door neighbours heard his cries that they came and found the 16-month-old and found the bodies of the two women. So this has been a very concerning case, and police have been often saying that this is still a top priority for them. That was highlighted in 2017 when police actually put out a $1 million reward for any information that would lead to an arrest or a conviction. So they've been often talking about this, and then this breakthrough on Thursday, now confirmed in the morning, is the latest breakthrough, and we'll have to wait and see what happens now, but Victoria Police are hoping to extradite this man to Victoria.
Yeah, it's such a chilling case, and it's certainly stayed an infamous one over the years. As you say, there's been this arrest in Italy, and police are pushing for extradition. What could happen next?
That extradition process will take some time. But what is clear is that there are family members who have been long frustrated, in pain over these things. It's the families of Suzanne Armstrong, of Susan Bartlett, and Gregory himself, the boy that was forced to grow up without his mother. Those families have been constantly talking about the need for closure here. And that $1 million reward at the time, police did say that they still had about 100 people of interest that they were wanting to speak to, but clearly they had a lot of information even at that time, and they've been waiting for something to happen that has now prompted this arrest. And the main thing that happens before even all of that, before any closure, is that the police will be speaking about this arrest and what happens in the extradition process later today. That'll be about 2 o'clock today, and we'll endeavour to get that live on News Channel as well.
Appreciate that. Thank you, Iskander Razak, for that update. A United Nations official has called on countries to leverage their influence to prevent an all-out war in the Middle East. It comes after an Israeli strike in the Lebanese capital Beirut killed at least 14 people and injured dozens more. The UN Political Affairs Chief has told the Security Council that further violence between Israel and militant groups in Gaza and Lebanon risks igniting a far more damaging conflict.
Too many lives have been lost. Too many people have been displaced. And too many livelihoods have been destroyed. But if things continue as they are, we risk seeing a conflagration that could dwarf even the devastation and suffering witnessed so far. It's not too late to avoid such folly. There is still room for diplomacy, which must be used without delay.
Middle East correspondent Eric Twarchek has more.
Israel's military says it bombed a meeting between senior commanders in Hezbollah's Special Forces unit. They were meeting underground beneath a residential building. Israel says all of them were killed. It's not yet clear how many civilians were killed in the strike, although there are reports a number of children died. The Israeli military says the group was planning an October 7 style attack inside northern Israel. The main target was Ibrahim A'il, one of the longest-serving members of Hezbollah and its head of operations. He was also wanted by the United States government for alleged involvement in the bombing of the US Embassy and US Marine Corps barracks in Beirut in 1983. His killing follows the assassination of Hezbollah's Chief of Staff Fuad Shukr in an Israeli airstrike in the same part of Beirut in late July. It also follows this week the detonation of thousands of Hezbollah's communication devices like pagers and handheld radios. Those explosions killed 37 people and wounded more than 3,000. They've left Hezbollah reeling, but the group has promised to respond. The Israeli government wants Hezbollah to withdraw from the border area and stop firing rockets, drones and missiles into Israel. Hezbollah fired around 200 rockets into Israel yesterday, but no casualties were reported.
Meanwhile, Israel's military has launched an internal investigation after soldiers were filmed shoving bodies from a rooftop during a raid in the occupied West Bank. The IDF says the incident was not in line with its values or what is expected of its soldiers. The military says 4 Palestinian gunmen were killed during the operation. However, Palestinian officials say 7 people died. Washington has demanded an explanation from Israel, describing the video as deeply disturbing. Government documents reveal Australia's spy agency ran a security check on every Palestinian visa holder earlier this year, despite coalition claims that refugees aren't being properly vetted. Briefing papers tabled in the Senate reveal ASIO was provided with a list of more than 2,600 Palestinian visa holders in March. The coalition has called for a ban on entrance from Gaza during the conflict, based on concerns they weren't being thoroughly vetted. The documents also show ASIO cancelled the visas of 5 people deemed to pose a risk to Australia's security. Acting Prime Minister Richard Marles says he has full faith in the screening process.
The process that has been undertaken here is the same process that was in place under the former government, undertaken by exactly the same agencies, and it's a rigorous process. And what we now know is that everyone from Palestine who is here on an Australian visa has been checked by ASIO. We are completely confident in our security agencies and the wonderful job they do to keep Australians safe.
The Prime Minister has spent 90 minutes chatting with US President Joe Biden in Delaware at his private residence. Their discussion was wide-ranging, covering issues such as regional security and US-Australia relations. National Affairs Editor Melissa Clark has the latest from nearby Philadelphia.
Anthony Albanese spent 90 minutes with US President Joe Biden at one of his private residences in his home state of Delaware. It's the first time a foreign leader has been invited into his private home, and that personal touch reflects the nature of the meeting that the two leaders had, which clearly looked back at the time that Joe Biden has had in public life, and Anthony Albanese making it clear he's learnt a lot from Joe Biden over the years and the meetings that they've had together. The discussions were more wide-ranging than that. They covered a range of global events, Ukraine, the Middle East, also went to key economic issues facing both countries, how to process critical minerals, how to tackle climate change. So this broad meeting covered a lot of ground, but ultimately it was very much about the relationship between Joe Biden and Anthony Albanese.
Well, it was an opportunity for me to express my support and congratulations for the role that President Biden has played. He has been a good friend of Australia, but he's also been an advocate for the rule of law. The other thing about President Biden as well is he's someone who is optimistic and someone who speaks about hope. Hope's always better than fear.
Now, the big meeting will be tomorrow when the leaders of the Quad nations, so that's the US, Australia, Japan and India, will meet again, this time at Joe Biden's old school, so again, another personal touch. Now, we know that primarily they'll be focused on regional security, what's happening with China, particularly in the South China Sea, and of course the regime in North Korea are key issues for the Quad to deal with. But their remit is certainly growing. We know they're going to be making announcements on maritime issues, looking to have joint exercises with coast guards in the Pacific. There are also going to be joint announcements on health funding around cancer prevention. So the Quad is certainly engaging in a very broad brief of issues, and that's notable because there had been some concern that when we come to the November US presidential election, if Donald Trump were to be elected, it wasn't clear what his commitment to the Quad and other bodies of regional cooperation might be. But Anthony Albanese today has made it clear that with his discussions, not just with the White House, but with other members of Congress, that he's confident that the American support for the Quad negotiations and American support for AUKUS in particular, for the Australia, UK and US arrangements, will remain strong regardless of who enters the White House in November.
I know from my own experience, one-on-one discussions I've had across the Congress and across the Senate, how deep the support for AUKUS is. And there is no question in my mind that AUKUS will continue to have the support of any future US administration.
And with the latest escalation of tensions in the Middle East, that too was on the agenda for Anthony Albanese and Joe Biden. They didn't go into a great deal of detail about precisely what they discussed, but Anthony Albanese took the opportunity in speaking to the media afterwards to reiterate his concerns about the cost the conflict has had on Palestinian lives, on Israeli lives, and his concerns that that could escalate into broader conflict in the Middle East. And he urged Australians who are in Lebanon, who have the ability to leave and come home, to do so immediately, warning that if things were to escalate, that this may be their best chance to get out safely.
Melissa Clark there. Police are investigating after a man was found in a critical condition at a house in the Geelong suburb of Nor Lane, southwest of Melbourne. Emergency services were called to a property on Eagle Parade just after 10:30 last night, where they found a 35-year-old man unconscious. He was flown to hospital, where he remains in a critical condition. Police say circumstances surrounding the man's condition are unknown, but at this stage it's not being treated as suspicious. Today, Sri Lankans cast their votes in a pivotal presidential election. It's the first since an unprecedented economic crisis brought the country to the brink of bankruptcy. South Asia correspondent Ellie Grounds reports from Colombo.
I'm here at one of the main hubs of action in Colombo in this presidential election. From here, ballot papers and boxes have been distributed to polling booths across the city, and there are thousands across the country, where today Sri Lankans will cast their vote in a presidential election that has the potential to alter the course of this country's future as it continues to emerge from an unprecedented economic crisis 2 years ago. Now, given the mass protest that crisis unleashed, security has been beefed up for this election. 63,000 police officers have been deployed at polling booths and counting centres like this one across the country, and 11,000 military members remain on standby to assist if the Election Commissioner General requests it. Many things are unique about this election. Its timing, its relative peacefulness, and the fact there are 3 main candidates emerging as frontrunners. Another unique factor is the length of the ballot paper. 39 names are listed, a record number, but all of them are men. And many women who bore the brunt of those severe shortages of essentials 2 years ago and continue to suffer under high goods prices want a candidate who they think will make their lives easier.
Sometimes the milk powder was, I think it's triple from the before price. So we reduced use that one. If we can't buy, we give up that. I have a hope if we change this government, we can see another side of this.
In-person voting has begun in the US today, kicking off the 6-week sprint until November's US presidential election. There's been a strong turnout on the first day of in-person voting, with people lining up in Minnesota, South Dakota and Virginia. About a dozen more states will also open for early voting next month. Speaking in Wisconsin, Kamala Harris says it's time to make their voices heard.
We have work to do. To energize, to organize, and to mobilize, and to remind everyone, your vote is your voice, and your voice is your power, and never let anyone take your power from you. So, Madison, today I ask you, are you ready to make your voices heard?
British actor David Graham, widely known for voicing the role of Grandpa Pig in Peppa Pig, has died at the age of 99.
Granny Pig, take the wheel.
Aye, aye, Captain.
Full sail.
Graham brought numerous characters to life on the show Thunderbirds, as well as starring as the unemotional and harsh voice of the Daleks in the sci-fi series Doctor Who between the 1960s and the late 70s. But to today's generation of children, he'll be most familiar as the voice of Grandpa Pig in the TV series Peppa Pig. He's being remembered as a kind and generous man with his time and talent. Scientists and rangers in Western Australia have discovered an ecological time capsule beneath one of the state's spectacular beaches. The ancient peat bog contains organic material from thousands of years ago, and they say it could provide vital lessons for today's changing climate.
Locals describe Western Australia's Warton Beach as a magical place, but a recent discovery has given that description new meaning.
Pretty big stump.
The Esperance Dalyarrak Native Title Aboriginal Corporation has been closely monitoring this beach ever since an unusual discovery in 2021. An extreme tide had revealed an unusual log which Ranger Jeremy Smith found and had sent away to be radiocarbon dated.
Came back 7,000 plus years of age, so it was a pretty cool find.
It was extremely exciting news.
It's a little time capsule that we're uncovered, and it's just really the tip of the iceberg in terms of what we need to explore and study.
As the peat had been sealed over by sand and sea for so long, they hoped it might contain organic material from thousands of years ago.
It's kind of like a gateway into a lost landscape of the past.
Since then, that gateway to the past has been covered over again by the tide. But in early June, the Dalyarrak Rangers made another discovery. The latest piece of ancient stump was sent to the University of New South Wales for testing.
By measuring how much radiocarbon is left in the sample, we can determine how old it is.
It's been 2 months since the Rangers first dug the stump out of Warton Beach. Today, they're finally going to learn how old it is.
We divided the peat up into 2 samples, and they were 6,870 years and 7,060 years. And the tree trunk is just a little bit older than that at 7,120 years.
Just to see how old that is very amazing.
The Rangers are now excited at the prospect of uncovering more ancient stories about this unique part of Australia. Emily Smith, ABC News, Esperance.
And you can see more of that story on Landline on Sunday. Let's get some sports headlines now with Jared Coote.
Swans are through to the AFL Grand Final after beating Port Adelaide by 36 points at the SCG. The Swans dominated the preliminary final, 14 goals, 11.95 to 8.11.59. The Swans led at every break, with Isaac Heaney a standout with 24 disposals and 2 goals. Sydney has now qualified for 2 grand finals in the past 3 seasons. The Swans will face the winner of today's match between Geelong and Brisbane in the decider.
Yeah, it's a great spot to be in. It's what you work for, you started training way back last year, and before that really, it's after the last game last year, you go into preparation mode straight away with staff and different things and players, and you work really from our last game right through. The players came back terrific, and we give ourselves an opportunity next week, and so it's terrific. I thought we executed today as good as we could have. Our method was really good. We were strong in the contest. We concentrated on our process and lived in the moment, got the job done.
North Melbourne has claimed a 36-point win over Port Adelaide in round 4 of the AFLW. Alice O'Loughlin kicked 2 goals for the Roos, while Jasmine Gardner collected 30 disposals in the victory. The win sees the Kangaroos climb to the top of the ladder with 3 wins and a draw for the season. The Cronulla Sutherland Sharks are through to an NRL preliminary final after a 26-18 win over the North Queensland Cowboys at the Sydney Football Stadium last night. Wallaroos have lost to Wales 31 points to 24 after conceding a last-minute try. Scores were locked at 7-all at half-time before the home side jumped out to a 9-point lead. Australia fought back and levelled proceedings with just 2 minutes remaining. Kate Williams then scored an 81st minute winner to give Wales their first ever win over Australia. And the scores are level between Team Europe and Team World after the first day of competition at Tennis Laver Cup in Berlin. The doubles pairing of Ben Shelton and Taylor Fritz defeated Carlos Alcaraz and Alexander Zverev 7-4, 6-2 to tie the scores at 2-all at the end of day 1. Earlier, Australia's Thanasi Kokkinakis lost to 12th-ranked Stefanos Tsitsipas in the singles 6-1, 6-4. Team World is bidding to win its 3rd consecutive Laver Cup after victory in London in 2022 and Vancouver just last year. And the Perth Wildcats have beaten South East Melbourne Phoenix 106 points to 98 in their NBL opening round clash at Perth Arena. Keanu Pinder top scored for the Wildcats with 29 points, while Jordan Hunter had 19 for the Phoenix. 4-time league MVP Bryce Cotton managed 8 3-pointers in the victory.
Let's take a look at the weather now with Jessica Rendall.
Hello, let's start in Queensland, where some scattered showers are forecast along parts of the Sunshine Coast right up to Bundaberg. Mostly sunny elsewhere though, with the chance of a thunderstorm about parts of the southeast. In New South Wales and the ACT, dry and sunny conditions on the cards this weekend, apart from the chance of showers over the far southern inland around Albury, and there's still a high fire danger rating for the Greater Sydney and Illawarra Shoalhaven districts. In Victoria, showers forecast for much of the state today, with small hail possible over parts of Gippsland. A cool to cold day with moderate to fresh west to northwesterly winds and a high fire danger rating for the Mallee. Down in Tassie, showers for Hobart, Strachan and Devonport. Cloudy elsewhere with gusty winds over the Bass Strait Islands. In South Australia, isolated showers expected over parts of the southeast. Partly cloudy and dry elsewhere, getting to a top of 21 degrees in Renmark. In the west, scattered showers over the southern coastal districts with a bit of cloud about there too. Windy in Geraldton today with a top of 25 degrees. Up north, showers and thunderstorms over the Kimberley and Pilbara, with some heavy falls expected over that region too, thanks to a broad trough of low pressure that's expected to deepen this weekend. Wet too over parts of the top end, with the chance of thunderstorms over the Daly and Gregory districts this afternoon. High fire danger in the northern Barkly and eastern Carpentaria districts. Let's look ahead now to tomorrow's forecast for the capital cities. Partly cloudy and 27 in Brisbane tomorrow. A sunny Sunday in store for Sydney. Cloudy in Canberra and in Melbourne. A shower or two for Hobart and Adelaide. Sunny in Perth and some patchy cloud in Darwin, but mostly fine otherwise, getting to a top of 34 degrees there.
After a week on the run, Cinnamon the capybara has been found safe and well in a pond. The giant South American rodent captured international attention after her bold escape and is now said to be recuperating in her zoo enclosure in the UK.
Hey guys, so we tracked Cinnamon down to our pond on our conservation area.
The moment Cinnamon the capybara is finally captured after a week on the run. Staff at Who Zoo in Telford finally spotted the elusive rodent in a pond not very far away and waded in so they could surround her. The taste of freedom has proved highly desirable. Cinnamon was able to elude her keepers by hiding in thick undergrowth. This afternoon, the game was up.
If you drew a line from her enclosure to where the pond is located, it's about 250 metres. So she really hadn't travelled that far, but she was obviously having too much fun out there and didn't want to bring herself back. So unfortunately, we did have to bring her back. We can't just leave capybaras out in the wild, as much as I'm sure we'd all love that. Yeah, we're very pleased that she's now back here.
The story of Cinnamon the escapee has captured people's imagination, but for now the zoo wants her to stay out of the public eye so she can recuperate. While Cinnamon is resting from her ordeal in the enclosure behind me, the zoo says she'll be checked over by vets in the coming days and reintroduced to the public next weekend. Meanwhile, an extra gate is being erected around Cinnamon's pen to make sure there's no repeat of the Great Escape.
And there's more on the ABC News app and, of course, on ABC iView too. I'm Ruby Cornish. Thank you for your company and stay with us. ABC Regional News is coming up next.